She was just a little girl, her tiny hands gripping the handle of a worn stroller. Her baby brother whimpered softly, his cheeks flushed, and with a trembling voice she whispered, "Please, can we pay later? My mom is very sick." The shopkeeper shook his head. Rules were rules, but standing nearby was a man who had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. In that moment, something inside him cracked wide open. This isn't just a story about kindness. It's about what happens when one desperate plea collides with a man's buried wounds, and how a single choice can change the course of many lives. Stay with us, because what unfolds next will move you in ways you didn't expect. If you believe in second chances and the power of love, subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, and let your heart find a home here. Michael Turner had always been the kind of man people admired from a distance. His life was carefully constructed, a shining tower of success that others envied but never touched. The world saw the black Mercedes, the expensive suits tailored to perfection, the confident stride of someone who had conquered every boardroom battle placed before him. Yet when he closed his eyes at night, when the phone stopped ringing and the applause of achievement faded, he felt nothing but silence pressing in on all sides. Success was his crown, but it had been forged out of loneliness. On a humid August afternoon, Michael found himself stopping outside a small corner store he would normally have passed by without a second glance. The sign above the door was faded, its paint cracked from years of weather, and the hum of the refrigerator inside leaked faintly onto the sidewalk. He carried his briefcase as though it were an extension of his body, the same way a soldier might carry a weapon, but there was no war here, just an unfamiliar quiet. He should have been on another call, negotiating another deal, feeling the thrill of power. Instead, there was only a strange emptiness that had been gnawing at him for years. The door jingled weakly as he stepped inside, and immediately a wave of thick air washed over him. The smell of cleaner mixed with old bread and the metallic whine of a ceiling fan that seemed to spin slower than time itself. Michael glanced around. He had not stood in a store like this in decades, not since he was a boy following his father down aisles stacked with canned soup and dented boxes of cereal. Those memories had faded beneath years of ambition, but the echo of them stirred as his polished shoes squeaked on the worn linoleum. He wandered down an aisle, scanning shelves filled with ordinary things he never bought anymore. The city outside demanded glass and steel, wealth and precision, but here in this modest market, he felt strangely out of place and at the same time almost invisible. For a brief moment, that invisibility was a relief. He could be anyone here, not the CEO whose name was printed across financial headlines. He reached for a carton of overpriced cold brew, his mind already drifting back to the hollow ring of his last phone call, when a sound cut through the stillness. It was not loud, not even clear at first, but it carried a weight that made him freeze in place. A child's voice, trembling, almost breaking. He turned instinctively toward the checkout counter, and what he saw rooted him where he stood. A little girl no more than 6 stood on tiptoe at the counter, her tiny hands gripping the handle of a battered stroller. Her brown hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, her shirt faded and stretched at the seams, sneakers untied and worn thin. Inside the stroller lay a baby boy barely old enough to sit up, his cheeks flushed, his thumb in his mouth as he whimpered softly. The girl's posture was stiff, as if she were holding the world on her shoulders, and yet her voice quivered when she spoke. "Please, he needs milk. Can we pay later? Mommy's sick at home." The words slipped into the air with such fragile sincerity that Michael felt something inside him crack. His breath caught before he could stop it. He remembered another voice, years ago, his own, asking for help and being told the world had no place for weakness. The memory burned in his chest, rising with the force of a ghost he thought he had buried long ago. The shopkeeper, an older man with eyes heavy from years of hardship, shook his head slowly. "I am sorry, sweetheart. We cannot do tabs, store policy." His tone was gentle but final. The girl's chin dipped. She tightened her grip on the stroller, her knuckles whitening, her little brother fussing louder as if echoing her despair. The scene was painfully ordinary, yet to Michael it felt as though the entire store, the entire city, had vanished, leaving only this child's plea ringing in the air. He stepped forward before he even realized he had moved. His voice came out louder than intended, almost urgent. "Put it on my tab. Whatever they need, I will cover it." The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, dark, and far too old for her small face. For a moment, suspicion flickered there, as if she were searching for a trick, a hidden price. Slowly, almost reluctantly, her shoulders eased and her lips curved into a faint, fragile line of gratitude. "Thank you, mister," she whispered, "but we will pay you back. Mommy says we have to." Michael shook his head gently, unable to keep the ache from his chest. "Do not worry about it. Just take care of your brother and your mother." The shopkeeper, moved by something unspoken, added a loaf of bread and a small bottle of baby medicine into the bag. The girl tucked the groceries carefully beneath the stroller. As she pushed it toward the door, she looked back at Michael, her eyes carrying something more than gratitude. It was a question, one she could not bring herself to speak. "Will you stay, or will you vanish like everyone else?" The bell jingled faintly as the door swung open, sunlight streaming in and catching on her thin hair. Michael stood frozen, his hands shaking. He saw not only Zoe, the storekeeper had murmured her name as she left, but the shadow of his younger sister, frail and coughing in the night, gone far too soon. The ache in his chest deepened. As Zoe disappeared down the sidewalk with her baby brother, the weight of silence in the store pressed in on him. He paid for his own coffee but left it untouched, stepping back outside into the brightness of the day. The city was loud, cars rushing, voices clattering, but all he could hear was the tremor in Zoe's voice. He should have walked back to his car, should have slipped into the armor of wealth and routine, but something inside him resisted. His feet felt heavy, yet they carried him forward, not toward his office or his penthouse, but in the direction of the little girl and the stroller squeaking down the cracked pavement. Each step was unfamiliar, unplanned, but strangely freeing. As though for the first time in years, he was walking toward something real. Michael kept a careful distance as he followed Zoe and her brother. The late morning sun bore down on the cracked sidewalks, glinting off rusted fences and broken glass that had long since been swept to the side. Zoe pushed the stroller with determined little steps, her thin arms straining as the wheels wobbled against uneven pavement. Every so often she reached in to squeeze Daniel's hand, whispering comfort in words too soft for Michael to hear. He felt like a ghost trailing behind, pulled forward by something he could not quite explain, something that lived deeper than guilt, heavier than curiosity. When Zoe finally turned down a narrow street lined with sagging porches and paint that had long lost its shine, Michael hesitated. The neighborhood looked tired, the air heavy with years of neglect. He watched her drag the stroller up chipped concrete steps, the door marked only with a hand-drawn 2B. The sight struck him with a strange familiarity. He knew this place without knowing it. Peeling walls, rusted railings, the faint smell of mold drifting out through half-open windows. He stood on the sidewalk, frozen, the shadow of his own childhood flickering in the corners of his memory. He told himself to turn back, to leave this behind, but the image of Zoe's steady little shoulders held him in place. He returned to his office that afternoon, late for the first time in years, his mind refusing to settle. Numbers and reports blurred into meaningless shapes. When his assistant Brooke entered with updates, her voice carried a concern he had not noticed before. She was loyal, efficient, precise, but now her eyes lingered on him with quiet worry. He surprised himself by asking her for something personal, something human. "I need you to find someone," he said, his voice unsteady. "Her name is Zoe Carter. She lives at Parkview Towers. She has a baby brother. Their mother may be sick. Please, discreetly." Brooke blinked, caught off guard, then nodded. "Of course," she said softly. He realized she had never heard him ask for help in all the years they had worked together. As she left, Michael felt the walls of his carefully built world tilt, shifting under the weight of something he had not planned for. That night he lay in the silence of his penthouse, the city lights sprawled beneath him like scattered jewels. Yet all he saw were Zoe's eyes at the store, that flicker of hope and suspicion. Sleep refused to come. Memories pressed in, the fragile voice of his sister, the hospital corridors, the unbearable moment when he had been left behind. By the time his phone vibrated after midnight, he was already awake, restless. Brooke's voice came through the line. "I looked into Zoe Carter," she said carefully. "Child Protective Services has had reports. Missed rent, hospital visits, concerns from neighbors. It is not good." Michael's chest tightened. "Thank you," he whispered, hanging up quickly. He sat in the dark, the information pressing on him like a stone. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of urgency that had nothing to do with business or money. It was not pity. It was not guilt. It was something fiercer, an instinct to act, to protect. By dawn, he was driving with bags of groceries, formula, and medicine in the backseat. He climbed the stairs to 2B, his footsteps echoing against the weary walls, and set the bags down gently outside the door. He stood there for a long time, torn between knocking and retreating. His hands shook as he remembered the look on Zoe's face. In the end, he turned away, leaving the offering behind unseen. Inside, Zoe discovered the groceries as sunlight slipped through thin curtains. Her gasp of wonder carried into the kitchen, where Jessica, pale and exhausted, limped to her side. Jessica's eyes darkened as she inspected the bags. "Nothing is free," she warned, her voice rough with fatigue. But Zoe, ever hopeful, whispered, "Maybe it was the milkman, Mom, the one who helped us." Jessica did not answer, but she pulled the bags inside. The day wore on in uneasy silence. Jessica fought through pain to care for her children, but her body betrayed her. Zoe took on tasks far too heavy for her age, cooking noodles, soothing Daniel, watching her mother collapse onto the sofa in exhaustion. That evening, a sharp knock rattled the door. A stern woman with a CPS badge entered, her eyes scanning every corner of the small apartment. Jessica's pride flared as she insisted they were fine, but the questions, about income, about meals, about rent, cut deeper than she could hide. Zoe's gaze flickered toward the door, as though she expected Michael to appear, but the hallway remained empty. Across town, Michael sat alone, staring at his phone, his chest heavy with regret. He wondered if leaving groceries had been enough, if anything would ever be enough. For the first time, he prayed for something beyond himself. The following day, unable to stay away, he returned to the building. He found Zoe outside, struggling with a trash bag nearly as big as she was. Her boots were too large, the laces dragging. He stepped forward gently, offering to help. She recognized him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "You are the milkman," she whispered. He nodded, tying her shoelaces with clumsy care. Her question came quietly. "Why did you help us?" He searched for an answer that felt true. "Because you asked. And because sometimes everyone needs a little help." It was not trust yet, but something softer began to grow in her gaze. Inside, Jessica watched from the window, her body tense. She wanted to chase him away, to protect her children from promises that might crumble. But when she saw her daughter's shoulders relax, when she saw the shoelaces tied neatly, her anger cracked into something more fragile. Jessica stepped outside, her voice sharp but her eyes weary. "What do you want? You cannot just show up here." Before Michael could answer, Daniel's cough tore through the air, deep and rattling. Jessica froze. Panic overtook pride, and in that moment all her defenses crumbled. She whispered the words she had been fighting against. "If you can help, please, we need you." Michael did not hesitate. He scooped Daniel into his arms, the boy frighteningly light. "Let us go," he said firmly. Jessica grabbed her purse. Zoe clutched her brother's blanket, and they rushed down the stairs together. For the first time, Zoe slipped her hand into Michael's, small and trembling but filled with trust. In his car, the leather seats and quiet hum of the engine felt like another world compared to the crumbling apartment. Zoe's wide eyes reflected the glowing dashboard as Michael called the children's hospital, using every connection he had to open the doors quickly. At the emergency room, chaos blurred around them. Forms, questions, bright lights. Daniel was swept away to doctors and machines. Jessica sat trembling, guilt heavy on her face. Michael stayed beside her, silent but steady, refusing to leave. Hours passed. Daniel was diagnosed with pneumonia, serious but treatable. Relief broke through exhaustion as Jessica wept quietly. Zoe curled against Michael's arm, clinging to him as though he were the only solid thing left in the world. And in that moment, Michael realized this was no longer about helping strangers. It was about finding the family he had not known he was searching for. The sound of Daniel's coughing haunted the sterile corridors, breaking through the beeping of machines and the shuffle of nurses' shoes. For Michael, it was more than just the cry of a sick child. It was an echo of his own past, the memory of another hospital room where a younger sister had slipped away, leaving him hollow. Now, as he stood by the bedside of a baby who was fighting to breathe, the wound of that memory opened wide. Jessica hovered at the edge of the room, her face pale, her hands twisting a cheap rosary until her knuckles turned white. She had spent years pushing forward on stubborn strength, refusing to show weakness, but the cracks were visible now. Zoe sat close, Daniel's old blanket clutched tightly in her lap. Her eyes, far too serious for her age, searched every doctor's expression for reassurance. Michael did not know where he belonged in this chaos. He was a man who had mastered control, who knew how to bend markets to his will, but here he was powerless. He wanted to reach for Zoe, to give her some comfort, yet hesitated, afraid to cross a line. But when her eyes finally met his, he forced a smile, small but steady. To his surprise, she leaned closer, as if that tiny gesture was enough to anchor her. Hours passed in fragments of worry. At last, the doctors explained that Daniel's pneumonia was serious but treatable with antibiotics and oxygen. The tightness in Michael's chest eased, though it did not vanish. Jessica collapsed into a chair, trembling with relief. "I failed them," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I should have seen it coming." Michael sat beside her. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes red from exhaustion. "You did everything you could, you never gave up. That matters." She looked at him skeptically, but her silence was less sharp than before. Zoe climbed into Michael's lap without asking, curling against him with a trust so unguarded it left him stunned. He froze for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her carefully as if she might vanish. The scent of her hair, faint bubblegum and dust, overwhelmed him with emotions he had long buried. She tilted her face up, her voice trembling. "Please do not leave us. Everyone leaves." Michael's throat tightened. He remembered his sister's hand slipping from his in the night, remembered the hospital bed that had grown cold. He could not erase that past, but he could give this little girl a different future. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I am not going anywhere, Zoe. I promise." Jessica heard those words. She studied his face and saw something raw and real, something that softened the walls she had built. She asked, almost accusing, "Why are you doing this?" Michael hesitated, then answered with disarming honesty. "Because you need someone to stay, and so do I." The days in the hospital became a strange new rhythm. Michael arrived early each morning, bringing small gifts, coffee for Jessica, coloring books for Zoe, snacks for the nurses who had been so kind. His phone buzzed with calls from his office, but he answered few of them. His assistant Brooke rearranged meetings, his COO covered for him, and still Michael stayed. He read stories to Zoe at night, sat with Jessica through endless forms, and held Daniel's tiny hand as machines beeped softly. One afternoon, Lauren appeared at the door. Michael's estranged sister had received a message from him, a message that had said simply, "I need help." Her arrival was hesitant, her expression uncertain, but the moment she saw Zoe curled on a chair, she knelt gently beside her. She introduced herself, slipping a silver charm from her own wrist and fastening it onto Zoe. The little girl's shy smile broke open something new in the room, a fragile connection that stretched across pain and mistrust. Jessica, too, began to change. At first she resisted every offer of help, determined to do everything herself. But exhaustion has a way of peeling back pride. One evening, as she struggled to make sense of a stack of discharge papers, Michael quietly took them from her hands. "Let me help," he said. She allowed it, shoulders sagging as she leaned closer. For the first time, she admitted without words that she could not carry it all alone. The nurses noticed. Carla, the pediatric nurse who had cared for Daniel's first feverish night, often lingered to braid Zoe's hair or teach Jessica simple stretches for her aching back. "You are not alone in this," she said once, squeezing Jessica's hand. The words hung in the air like a blessing. One rainy afternoon, Zoe worked quietly with her crayons, her tongue pressed between her lips. After nearly an hour, she approached Michael with a folded sheet of paper. Inside was a drawing of 4 figures beneath a smiling sun. Each had a name written carefully beneath: Mommy, Daniel, Zoe, Michael. His hands trembled as he held it, his throat burning with unshed tears. For the first time in years, someone had placed his name inside the outline of a family. Jessica saw his reaction, and though she said nothing, her expression softened. When the social worker returned with questions about housing and stability, Jessica faltered, her voice thin with fear. Michael stood, Zoe's drawing in his hands, and spoke with conviction he had never used in a boardroom. "This is not a broken family. They just need a second chance. And I will be here until they are on their feet. I will not let them fall through the cracks." Lauren added her voice, steady and sure. The social worker studied them, her face unreadable, but there was no mistaking the shift in the room. The weeks that followed were filled with small, deliberate changes. Michael helped Jessica apply for a remote job, guiding her through the unfamiliar steps of a computer. Lauren scrubbed walls in the Carter apartment and hung new curtains. The dim, sagging space slowly brightened with life. Each evening, they gathered around a second-hand table, sharing meals, laughter, and the fragile hope of belonging. The custody hearing came at last. Jessica dressed in a borrowed blazer, Zoe and Daniel in matching sweaters, Michael in a suit that for once felt less like armor and more like family. The judge listened to reports, to progress, to promises. When Michael spoke, he held up Zoe's drawing. "Family is not measured by wealth or blood," he said, his voice steady. "It is measured by who stays when things get hard." When the judge ruled that Zoe and Daniel could remain with their mother, relief flooded the room. Jessica wept, clutching her children. Zoe squeezed Michael's hand, whispering, "You kept your promise." They returned home together, arms full of groceries, laughter spilling down the hallway. Zoe taped a handmade banner above their new table. It read in crooked letters, "Family." And for Michael, who had once lived in silence and shadows, the word was no longer a memory of loss. It was a promise of belonging, a new beginning built not on power, but on love that had finally found its way back to him. Life has a way of testing us in moments we least expect. For Michael Turner, the man who once measured his worth in profit margins and contracts, everything changed with a single trembling voice in a small corner store. That fragile plea for milk from a child too young to carry so much weight cracked open a heart that had long been sealed by grief and ambition. What began as one act of kindness became a chain of choices that redefined not just his life, but the lives of Zoe, Daniel, and Jessica. The journey was not simple. It was filled with fear, with uncertainty, with nights where hope felt like it could vanish at the sound of a cough or the knock of an official. Yet, step by step, something stronger grew. Michael discovered that true wealth is not found in glass towers or polished cars, but in the warmth of belonging, in the fragile trust of a child who dares to believe someone will stay, and in the quiet courage of a mother fighting for her family against impossible odds. Zoe's drawing of 4 stick figures beneath a crooked sun was more than paper and crayons. It was a declaration of love, of recognition, of healing. It was proof that family is not defined by perfection or bloodlines, but by the stubborn act of showing up. For Michael, being written into that drawing was more valuable than every deal he had ever closed. It was the reminder that even broken lives can be rebuilt, that loneliness can be replaced by connection, and that the act of staying, of choosing love again and again, is what truly saves us. Perhaps that is what makes this story so powerful. It tells us that hope is not lost, even in the hardest of places. That kindness, even when offered in the smallest form, has the power to ripple outward and mend what once felt shattered. It is a reminder to every one of us that we hold the ability to change a life, sometimes with nothing more than the courage to care. If this story touched your heart, know that it is not just about Michael or Zoe or Jessica. It is about all of us, about the ways we can rise above indifference and become part of something greater than ourselves. Because in the end, the world is not healed by grand gestures alone, but by ordinary people refusing to walk away when love is needed most. Here at Hidden Echo Stories, we believe in sharing these reminders, stories that echo with hope, resilience, and the undeniable truth that love still has the power to transform lives. If you believe in second chances, in kindness that never gives up, and in the beauty of found family, we invite you to join us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories today and let your heart continue to be part of these journeys. Because the next story might be the one that changes you, just as this one did for Michael.